Once, in a quiet little town by the edge of a wide northern river, there lived two children who were not brother and sister, yet loved each other as if they were born from the same heart. Their names were Gerda and Kay. They lived in two small attics that leaned toward each other across a narrow courtyard, so close that in summer they could reach out across the gutters and let their roses intertwine. Each window had a wooden box filled with herbs and flowers, basil, mint, and above all, the most beautiful roses. When the wind passed through, their perfume drifted into both rooms and mingled in the air, so that even the scent seemed to know no borders. In the evenings, when the golden light of sunset touched the rooftops, Gerda would bring out her old picture book, and Kay would read stories aloud to her in a low, careful voice. Sometimes they would imagine that their little rooftop garden was the greatest rose garden in the world. And sometimes they would whisper dreams to each other, dreams of growing up, of building a house together, of seeing the stars from a window framed with roses. Their grandmothers would laugh softly when they spoke like that. "They are still only children," they would say. But the grandmothers too, when the night deepened, would sometimes look up at the sky and wish that the children's laughter would last forever. Far away, in a cold and hidden place, something else stirred. There once had been a mirror, forged by a wicked and clever creature. Some said it was a troll, others said it was only the cruel shadow of human thought. Whatever it was, it loved to twist the truth. Everything beautiful that was reflected in that mirror looked distorted and ugly. Gentle faces appeared harsh, kind hearts looked foolish. Mountains seemed like molehills, and a single tear could seem a terrible sea. One day, the mirror broke. Thousands of sharp splinters flew out across the world, thin as frost, light as air. Some fell like snowflakes, invisible to the eye. But whoever caught one in the heart would grow cold and proud, and whoever caught one in the eye would see only what was cruel and small. No one knew where the shards went. Not yet. That winter came early. The first frost crept along the windows before the harvest was done, painting silver feathers on the glass. Gerda and Kay sat together by the stove, whispering over a single candle. Outside, the street was white and silent, and the old clock in the tower struck 6, its chime muffled by the snow. Kay pressed his face against the window pane, his breath fogging the glass. "How beautiful the snowflakes are tonight," he said. "They look like bees," said Gerda, "bees made of stars." A soft laugh came from the darkness beyond the window. Kay frowned. "Did you hear that?" Gerda turned, but there was only the snow swirling under the street lamp. He shrugged. It must be the wind. The next day, the world was pale and gleaming. The river had frozen over, and the roofs shone like porcelain. Gerda and Kay went out to play, their cheeks red with cold. They built a snowman taller than both of them and named him Mr. Winter. Kay shaped 2 bright icicles for eyes, and when he stepped back, he felt a strange sting in one of his own. "Ow," he said softly, rubbing his eye. "What's wrong?" asked Gerda. "It's nothing, just a speck of snow." But it was not snow. A tiny shard of the broken mirror had found its way into his eye, and another into his heart. He blinked. The world suddenly looked different. The snow was no longer soft and wonderful. It was only frozen water. The rose bushes that Gerda had covered for the winter looked shabby and dull. Even Gerda herself seemed smaller, her smile too simple. "You always talk nonsense," he said, brushing past her. Gerda stopped, hurt. "Kay, what do you mean?" "Your story's all about angels and roses. There are no such things." He laughed, short, cold, and went on ahead. Gerda stood still, her mittened hands clutching her coat. Around her, the snowflakes fell like white ashes. The winter deepened. Kay became restless, always outside, skating faster than anyone, daring the cold wind as if he wanted it to freeze him through. He laughed at people's fears, mocked their warm coats, and called the snow pure and clean because nothing could grow in it. When Gerda tried to talk to him, he would only smile thinly and say he had better things to do. And yet, sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, his face would soften. He would look at the sky, as if trying to remember something. A scent of roses, a voice, a warmth he had forgotten. But each time he blinked, the shard in his eye glittered, and the feeling was gone. One night, the snow was falling so thickly that the lamplight looked like 1,000 little stars dancing in the dark. Kay stood by the window again, his breath fogging the glass. Then, through the snow, he saw her. A woman, tall, slender, dressed in silver and white. Her eyes shone like 2 pieces of ice, and her hair streamed behind her like pale smoke. She sat in a sleigh shaped like a snowflake, drawn by white horses. She looked up at him and smiled, and that smile was like a cold wind sweeping through his chest. He ran outside without thinking. The gate banged open, the snow closed around him. The sleigh glided past, and he called out, "Wait!" The woman turned. "Are you cold?" she asked, her voice like the song of frozen rivers. "No," said Kay, his breath misting. "I'm not afraid of the cold." She smiled again. "Then come with me." He climbed into the sleigh, and the horses leapt forward, swift and silent. The town disappeared behind him, buried under snow and distance. The last thing he remembered was the sound of the wind, whispering like 1,000 mirrors breaking. Then all was still. Inside her little room, Gerda woke suddenly. The fire had gone out. The roses on the window were covered in frost. She called his name once, twice, but the night gave no answer. Outside, snow fell without end. Chapter 2. The Snow Queen appears. Snow fell for many days and nights after Kay vanished. At first, the townspeople said he must have gone skating down the river and lost his way. Some thought he had drowned beneath the ice. Others whispered that he had run away to see the world. But Gerda did not believe any of them. She waited by the window each evening, lighting a small candle and setting it beside the frost-covered glass so that its glow would guide him home. But the nights grew longer, and her candle became a tiny star in an ocean of white silence. Sometimes she dreamed that he was standing outside, looking in. His face pale and still, his eyes distant. But when she woke, there was only the wind, whispering under the eaves. Far away, where the northern lights rose like silent fires above the mountains, the Snow Queen rode her sleigh across the endless whiteness. She was not cruel, but neither was she kind. She was the stillness that comes after a storm, the beauty of frost that kills the flower. Her palace was built of drifting snow, her halls without walls or ceiling. The stars themselves shone through the roof of her domain. In her arms she held Kay. His cheeks were pale as marble, but his eyes were clear and cold. He had stopped feeling fear, or longing, or pain. The world seemed perfect to him now, smooth, ordered, without warmth or imperfection. The Snow Queen touched his forehead with a kiss. "Now you belong to the frost," she said softly. and Kay smiled faintly, as though he had always been meant to. Back in the little town, spring should have come, but it did not. The snow lingered in the streets, and the river remained frozen. Children waited for the first crocuses to bloom, but none came. Gerda tended the empty rose boxes by her window, brushing away the ice each morning as if to wake the flowers by will alone. One evening she knelt beside the cold soil and whispered, "If he were truly gone, I would feel it in my heart. He is not dead. I would know." Her grandmother sighed and stroked her hair. "Sometimes, my dear, love must sleep through a long winter before it wakes again." But Gerda did not wish to wait. She gathered her small shoes, a shawl, and a little piece of bread wrapped in paper, and when the dawn broke grey and soft, she kissed her grandmother goodbye. "I'm going to find him," she said. And the old woman, seeing the quiet determination in her eyes, did not stop her. The river was her first companion. Its surface shone like a mirror, thinly veiled with melting snow. Gerda called out over it, her voice trembling, "Have you seen Kay?" The river murmured in reply, carrying only fragments of sound. Then, almost gently, the current loosened a piece of ice near the shore, wide and flat like a raft. Gerda stepped upon it without fear. The current caught her and carried her away, rocking her like a cradle. She drifted beneath bridges, past fields, still sleeping under frost. The world was silent, except for the soft rush of water. She watched the clouds slide slowly above her, pale and luminous. Time lost its edges. She felt neither hunger nor cold, only the strange comfort of moving toward something unknown. At last, the river widened into a lake. Gerda's little raft brushed against reeds, and the current slowed. On the shore stood a small cottage, its walls covered in vines, though no leaves had yet appeared. The windows glowed with a warm golden light. Gerda climbed ashore, trembling and wet. She knocked softly at the door. An old woman opened it. Her face was kind, lined like the bark of an old tree, and her eyes shone with curiosity. "Poor child," she said, "you must be frozen. Come in." Inside, the air smelled of herbs and applewood smoke. The walls were hung with garlands of dried flowers, and a fire danced gently on the hearth. The woman wrapped Gerda in a quilt and gave her warm milk with honey. "Now tell me," she said, "how you came to drift upon the river all alone." Gerda told her everything about the roses, the mirror, and Kay. The woman nodded, listening, though her eyes grew strangely distant. When Gerda finished, the woman smiled. "You must rest here for a while. The world beyond is cold and unkind." She led Gerda into a small garden behind the cottage. The snow there was melting, and flowers were beginning to rise. Violets, tulips, lilies, all blooming at once, as though they had been waiting for her. Their colors shone under the soft sunlight, like jewels in water. Gerda gasped. "It's summer here." The old woman smiled. "Time moves differently in this place." She brushed Gerda's hair, and Gerda suddenly felt her eyelids grow heavy. "You'll remember everything in the morning," whispered the woman. But the woman's comb glinted faintly in the sunlight, made of smooth amber, and as it passed through Gerda's hair, her thoughts began to drift away, like petals on the wind. Days passed, perhaps weeks. Gerda played among the flowers, laughed with the birds, and forgot little by little why she had come. The garden was always full of light. The sky was never grey. No snow, no storm, no sorrow. But one evening, as she sat among the rose bushes, she noticed something strange. All the flowers swayed gently in the warm air, except for one small bush in the corner, its petals pale as frost, its leaves trembling. Gerda rose and touched it. The petals crumbled like snowflakes. Then, all at once, she remembered. Her breath caught. The roses on our windows, she cried. Kay loved them. Oh, how could I forget? She turned to run, but the garden path seemed endless, folding back on itself like a dream. Old Mother, she called, where are you? The house stood silent, the windows dark. Then the wind stirred, whispering through the flowers, and in that whisper she heard the faintest echo of Kay's laughter. She pressed her hands together. He's still out there, she said. He needs me. And as if the world had been waiting for her words, the sky above the garden turned pale and grey. The sunlight faded, the flowers drooped, and the air grew cold again. Gerda walked to the gate. The vines that had once bloomed now hung bare. She stepped out, and the gate closed softly behind her. The garden disappeared, leaving only a wide field of frost and mist. She tightened her shawl and began to walk. Somewhere in the north, beyond snow and distance, a palace of ice shimmered under the stars. And there, the Snow Queen looked into her mirror of frozen air and smiled faintly. The child remembers, she said. Her breath touched the glass, and for a moment, the image of a small girl walking through the snow glimmered like a star before fading. Chapter 3. The journey begins. The world had changed when Gerda stepped beyond the enchanted garden. The air was sharper now, filled with a quiet hum, as though every snowflake carried a secret. Frost shimmered along the edge of her shawl. The path wound across pale meadows where every blade of grass was silver. Above, the sky stretched wide and white, without sun or shadow. Only a cold, steady light that seemed to come from nowhere. Still, she walked. Her little boots crunched softly on the frozen earth. Each step sounded like a heartbeat against the silence. Kay, she whispered, over and over, as if the name itself could warm her. But only the wind answered, carrying her voice away into the endless white. At the edge of the meadow, she found a small crow, black against the snow, hopping along the fence. Its feathers gleamed faintly blue in the dim light. When it saw her, it tilted its head and spoke in a croaky, polite tone. You seem lost, little one. Gerda was too tired to be surprised. I'm looking for my friend, she said. His name is Kay. Have you seen him? The crow blinked. That depends. What does he look like? He has bright eyes, like sunlight on the river, and hair the color of chestnuts. He went away in the snow and never came back. The crow gave a slow nod. I might know something. There's a palace not far from here. Gold roofs, tall windows, music in the halls. A boy with sharp eyes lives there now. They say the princess herself found him on the road and brought him inside. Gerda's heart leapt. It must be him. The crow ruffled its feathers. Perhaps. The palace is a long way north, but I can guide you part of the way. So they went together, the little girl and the black bird. The road wound through forests where icicles hung like chandeliers from the branches, and the snow beneath them glittered as if sprinkled with glass dust. Sometimes they rested beneath a tree and shared crumbs of Gerda's bread. The crow told her stories in his rusty, comical voice, tales of kings and thieves, of the sun that hides behind clouds because it is shy. Gerda laughed softly, though her eyes often drifted toward the north. At dusk, the sky turned deep blue, and a faint glow rose in the distance, the lights of the palace. It shimmered like gold frozen in glass. Tall towers reached toward the heavens, and every window blazed with warmth. The music of violins floated out, delicate as snowflakes. "This is the place," said the crow, "but we must be clever. They don't let anyone in after dark." "I'll find a way," Gerda whispered. The crow led her around to a small side gate, half buried in snow. Through it, they entered the gardens, where frozen fountains stood like statues and rose bushes slept beneath a blanket of frost. They crept through a marble archway into a long corridor lined with mirrors. Candles flickered in silver holders, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine. "Stay close," said the crow, flapping ahead of her. "The princess's hall is at the far end." When they reached the great chamber, Gerda stopped. It was filled with golden light. At the far end of the room, upon a small throne beside a roaring fire, sat a young prince and princess. They were not much older than she, perhaps 16 or 17, and their faces were kind and gentle. But the boy was not Kay. His eyes were warm, not cold, his smile soft and human. Still, Gerda couldn't help the tears that came to her eyes. The princess saw her and stood. "Child, what are you doing here?" "I thought," Gerda began, but her voice trembled. "I thought he was someone else." The prince came down from the throne and took her hand. "You've come far, haven't you?" Gerda nodded. "I'm looking for my friend Kay. The Snow Queen took him away." At the mention of that name, a hush fell over the hall. Even the fire seemed to listen. The prince exchanged a glance with the princess. "We've heard of her," said the princess softly. "They say she lives beyond the forests, past the northern lights. Few ever go there." Gerda's small hands clenched. "But I will." The princess knelt beside her. "You are brave, and your heart is true." She looked at the prince. "We cannot let her go with nothing." The prince smiled. "No, we'll help." That night, they gave Gerda clean clothes of warm wool, soft boots lined with fur, and a hood as white as snow. They prepared a little sleigh for her, pulled by a gentle reindeer whose eyes were large and kind. The reindeer's name was Bay, and he knelt so Gerda could climb on his back. Before she left, the princess tied a small golden ribbon around Gerda's wrist. "It will remind you that warmth still exists," she said, "even in the coldest places." Gerda hugged them both. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll never forget." Then, under a sky full of stars, she set off again, this time faster, carried by Bay across the frozen plains. The wind sang in her ears like music, and the snow sparkled in the moonlight. The world seemed endless, and yet she felt no fear. The warmth from the palace lingered in her heart, steady and calm. Days passed, maybe weeks. Time melted into motion, into rhythm. Sometimes she slept curled against Bay's side, while the snow whispered around them. Sometimes she dreamed of roses blooming in the frost, of Kay's laughter echoing through the stillness. They crossed forests where the trees were heavy with ice, and through valleys lit by strange northern lights, green, violet, and silver, moving like silk across the heavens. Once, she thought she saw a figure far ahead on the snow, tall and pale, her hair like drifting smoke. But when she blinked, the vision was gone. "The Snow Queen," murmured Bay. Gerda touched his neck. "We'll find him before she hides him forever." The reindeer nodded solemnly. "The north will test you, little one. But remember, snow cannot fall where the heart burns warm." Gerda smiled faintly. "Then I will never freeze." They rode on through the twilight. The air grew colder, the stars sharper. At last they reached the edge of a dark forest. The trees stood like pillars, their branches black against the snow. Somewhere inside, wolves howled, low and distant. Bay stamped his hooves. "This is the borderland," he said. "Beyond this lies the realm of the robbers. I can go no further without rest." Gerda slid from his back and pressed her cheek to his fur. "You've brought me so far. Sleep now, I'll be safe." But the wind carried a whisper, one that sounded almost like laughter. The forest ahead waited, silent and deep. Gerda looked once more toward the northern sky, where the aurora shimmered faintly like a curtain of light. "Wait for me, Kay," she said. "I'm coming." And she stepped into the forest alone. Chapter 4: The Robber Girl. The forest closed around Gerda like a great sleeping beast. The trees were tall and black, their branches knitted together high above, letting through only a pale silver glow. Each step she took sank into soft snow that whispered as if it had secrets of its own. Somewhere far away, an owl cried, and the sound trembled through the stillness. She wrapped her shawl tighter and pressed on. Her breath floated before her in white clouds. The wind carried faint scents of pine and smoke. Smoke meant people, and people meant warmth. After a long while, the trees thinned. She saw a flicker of light ahead, low and golden, like a fire half hidden by snowdrifts. As she approached, the sound of laughter reached her ears. Rough, loud laughter mixed with the snorting of horses and the crackle of wood. Then she saw them, a camp of robbers, gathered around a great fire. Their tents were patched from animal skins. Their weapons gleamed in the flames. They were eating, drinking, shouting stories into the night. Gerda tried to slip past, but her boots crunched on the ice. Immediately, a dog barked, a lean, sharp-eared creature, and the camp fell silent. "Who's there?" shouted a voice. A tall man with a fur cloak stepped forward, holding a torch. Its light fell upon her small figure, her pale face framed by the white hood. "A child," someone muttered. "Lost or foolish?" The tall man grinned. "Both, I'd wager." Before she could move, they surrounded her. One woman, wide-shouldered and fierce, looked her up and down. "A fine cloak," she said, "and boots fit for a princess." Gerda trembled. "Please, I'm only looking for my friend. He was taken by the Snow Queen." At those words, a silence fell again. The woman's expression softened, though only slightly. "The Snow Queen," she said. "That one rides the winds beyond the mountains. None who chase her come back." "But I must find him," Gerda whispered. A rough laugh came from the shadows. "Then you'll freeze before you see her face." "Enough," said the woman. She turned to the others. "We'll take her to the hut. Let her warm herself. I'll decide what to do come morning." They brought Gerda to a wooden hut at the edge of the clearing. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and pine tar. The walls were covered in antlers, and a small fire glowed in the corner. The woman pointed to a stool. "Sit, eat." Gerda took a piece of bread, her hands shaking slightly. The woman watched her, then grunted. "You've courage, I'll give you that. What's your name?" "Gerda." "Well, Gerda, I am Mother Robber. This is no place for small dreamers. Still, it's a cold night. You'll stay till dawn." Later, when the camp had gone quiet, the door creaked open. A small figure slipped in. A girl, wild-haired, with a grin like a spark. Her coat was too big, her eyes bright as embers. "You're the one who came from the snow," she said, crouching beside Gerda. "Yes." "Who are you?" "They call me the robber girl," said the child proudly. "Mother says I'll be chief one day." She reached out and touched the golden ribbon on Gerda's wrist. "Pretty. Where did you get it?" Gerda told her about the prince and princess, about the river and the crow, about Kay and the Snow Queen. The robber girl listened, wide-eyed, her grin fading. "So you're going north," she said at last. "Beyond the mountains?" Gerda nodded. The girl's voice dropped. "They say strange things live there. The air sings, the stars move like fire. Mother says it's cursed." Gerda looked at the firelight flickering on the walls. "If Kay is there, then I must go." The robber girl watched her for a moment, then laughed softly. "You're foolish," she said, "but brave. I like that." Outside, the wind began to howl. The snow blew against the hut like handfuls of sand. The robber girl took Gerda's hand. "Come with me." They slipped out into the night. The campfires had burned low, and the robbers snored under heavy furs. Beyond the camp stood a pen where animals huddled together for warmth. Dogs, goats, and one great reindeer tied with a thick rope. Gerda gasped, "Bay!" The reindeer lifted its head, eyes shining with recognition. "Little one," he murmured, "I feared I had lost you." The robber girl grinned. "So it's true. You can talk. Mother says you're clever beasts from the north." Bay snorted. "Clever enough to know when freedom calls." The girl untied the rope. "Go then," she said. "Take her. I'll say you broke loose in the storm." Gerda looked at her in surprise. "You're letting us go?" The girl shrugged. "Why not? I want to see if your story's real. If you find your friend, tell him the robber girl sends her greetings." Gerda hesitated, then hugged her tightly. "Thank you." The girl stiffened for a moment, then laughed and pushed her away. "Go before I change my mind." Bay knelt, and Gerda climbed onto his back. The snow swirled around them as they left the camp behind. The wind bit at her face, but she felt only joy, wild and bright. The forest fell away, and the open plains stretched before them, endless and white. Above, the northern lights rippled like great ribbons of fire. Green and violet waves shimmered across the stars. The snow reflected their glow, so that it seemed the sky and earth had become one vast sea of light. Gerda leaned close to Bay's ear. "She helped us," she whispered. Bay nodded. "Even in the darkest woods, warmth finds a way." Behind them, in the distance, the robber girl stood at the edge of the camp, watching the lights in the sky. Her hair whipped in the wind, and for the first time she smiled without mischief. "Maybe," she murmured, "there's more to the world than what we take." They rode north through the night. The stars grew brighter, colder. The air shimmered with frost that sparkled like dust. Around dawn, they reached the foot of a mountain range. The peaks rose like glass towers into the pale blue sky. Bay stopped. His breath steamed in the cold. "This is as far as I can go," he said softly. "Beyond these mountains lies the Snow Queen's realm. Only those she calls can enter." Gerda slid down and placed a hand on his muzzle. "Then I will go on foot." Bay bent his great head. "Your courage is fire. Keep it close." He turned and disappeared into the whiteness, leaving only his hoofprints behind. Gerda looked up at the mountains. The wind sang faintly between the peaks, a thin, crystalline sound like 1,000 glass bells. She took a deep breath. "Kay," she whispered, "I'm coming." And she began to climb. Chapter 5. The Ice Palace. Gerda climbed for what felt like days. The wind grew sharper, slicing through the seams of her clothes. The snow rose higher until her footprints vanished behind her almost at once. The mountains glittered like glass in the pale light of an unseen sun. There was no day or night, only a slow pulse of brightness that shifted from pearl white to blue and back again. She passed ridges where icicles hung like spears, and caverns where the air hummed like a voice too deep to hear. Sometimes she thought she saw shapes in the snow, faces, arms, fleeting shadows that vanished when she blinked. Once, a drift opened into a hollow filled with crystals that shone in soft rainbow hues. She rested there for a moment, listening to the faint ringing sound the crystals made when the wind touched them. It was almost like distant bells, bells from a church she had once known, far, far away in summer. Her heart ached, but she kept walking. At last, the mountains opened onto a vast plain of ice. It stretched farther than the eye could see, smooth as glass, polished by endless winds. Far away, in the center of that frozen sea, something shone. Tall spires, delicate and pale as moonlight. The ice palace. Gerda's breath caught. For a moment she felt very small, like a single spark in a world made of silence. But she remembered Kay's smile, the scent of roses in the window boxes, the golden evenings of their childhood, and the memory warmed her like a secret flame. She began to run. The closer she came, the stranger the air grew. The cold was not painful. It was empty, pure, almost holy. The gates of the palace were open. No guards, no footsteps, only the low hum of frozen wind. She stepped inside. The halls were vast beyond imagining. Pillars of ice rose like organ pipes to a roof of glass, where the stars shone directly through. Every surface glittered. Floors, walls, even the air itself seemed alive with a pale shimmer. It was beautiful, but there was no life in it, only perfection. At the far end of the hall sat Kay. He was dressed in white, his hair pale as frost, his hands busy arranging shards of ice on the floor before him. He moved them with great care, as though solving a riddle only he could hear. When Gerda called his name, he did not look up. "Kay," she said again, stepping closer. He did not move. His lips were blue, his eyes clear and distant. A shadow passed along the wall. The air seemed to fold itself into a figure, tall, slender, her gown like drifting snow. The Snow Queen. She looked at Gerda with calm eyes that held no malice, only the stillness of endless winter. "You've come far," she said. Her voice was like the wind sweeping across a frozen lake. "Yes," whispered Gerda, "I came for him." The Queen inclined her head. "He is content. He has forgotten pain and hunger and time." "But he has forgotten love," Gerda said. "Love is a warmth that dies," replied the Queen. "Ice endures." She turned slightly, as if to leave. "If you can wake him, he may go. But if not, he will stay. That is all." Then she was gone, her form melting back into the air, like breath fading from glass. Gerda ran to Kay and knelt beside him. He was arranging his shards into patterns that glittered like runes. "Kay," she whispered, taking his cold hands in hers. "It's me. It's Gerda." For a moment his fingers twitched, then stilled again. His eyes were empty, fixed on the puzzle before him. She began to weep, not in fear, but in tenderness. Her tears fell onto his hands, warm and living. One drop slid across his skin and touched the little shard of glass in his heart. It shuddered, cracked, and melted away. Kay gasped. He blinked, and the light in his eyes changed, from glassy cold to trembling life. "Gerda," he whispered, "why are you crying?" She laughed through her tears. Because you're here, because I found you. He looked around, confused. The ice patterns before him seemed meaningless now. He reached for her hands, and warmth began to return to his skin. Tiny droplets of water formed where their fingers touched, glimmering in the pale light. All around them, the palace began to tremble softly, as though sighing in its sleep. The tall pillars shimmered. Cracks of light ran through the ice. Like veins of gold, Gerda helped him to his feet. "Let's go home." As they stepped toward the great doorway, a faint sound followed them, a tone like a harp string, rising and falling. The wind outside had softened. The stars shone lower, warmer. When they crossed the threshold, a wave of gentle air swept over them. The palace behind them began to fade, turning thinner and thinner until it was only mist. The sky blushed faintly with dawn. They walked hand in hand across the wide plain. The snow no longer bit their faces. It melted into tiny drops that sparkled in their hair. The world, once hard and silent, began to sing again. Small sounds at first, the drip of melting ice, the flutter of unseen wings, the heartbeat of returning spring. After a long journey, they came again to the foot of the mountains. There stood Bay, waiting among the pines. His coat gleamed silver in the morning light. "You did it," he said softly. I felt the air change. Kay looked at him, astonished. "The reindeer talks." Gerda smiled. "He always did. You just couldn't hear him before." Bay bowed his head. "Come, the way home is long, but the snow has softened. I will take you." They rode southward through forests waking from their sleep. The branches dripped with meltwater. The first birds called to one another in the thin, bright air. Sometimes Kay would look at the sky and whisper, "I dreamed of glass and silence, and you came through the snow." Gerda would only smile, "And now we dream of roses again." When they reached the river, its ice was breaking. The water ran clear, singing as it went. Gerda knelt and let her fingers sink into the current. It was cold but alive. Kay did the same, laughing softly at the shock of it. Behind them, in the far north, the last light of the aurora flickered and went out. In its place rose the golden light of morning. Chapter 6. Homecoming. The journey south was slower than the flight through snow. Every mile the air grew softer, tinged with the smell of pine and thawing earth. Where once the world had glittered blue and silver, it now gleamed with damp gold. Tiny buds showed through the melting drifts, and the river that had carried Gerda away so long ago now murmured beside them again, awake, bright, full of song. Kay rode behind Bay, his arms around Gerda's waist. Sometimes he would rest his cheek against her shoulder, as though to be sure she was real. Neither of them spoke much. Words seemed too heavy for the hush of the returning world. When at last the roofs of their town appeared on the horizon, smoke curling lazily from the chimneys, they both stopped to look. The steeple bell rang faintly over the fields. Its sound was no longer sharp and distant. It was warm, like bread just taken from the oven. They dismounted near the bridge, where the first snow had fallen months before. Bar bent his head, his breath steaming in the morning light. "This is where we part," he said. "My home lies north, where the ice still sleeps." Gerda stroked his muzzle. "You'll always have a place in our stories." Kay smiled. "Thank you, friend." The reindeer turned and walked away between the birches, his hooves leaving deep, shining prints that filled slowly with meltwater until they looked like mirrors. The little street was just as they had left it, yet not the same. Children were playing with wooden hoops. A woman shook a rug from her window. A dog barked once and then wagged its tail, uncertain whether to recognize them. Gerda's grandmother stood at the gate, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. For a moment she did not move. Then her hands flew to her mouth and she cried out, "Gerda!" Gerda ran to her, and the three of them held each other in silence. Laughter and tears mingled together. The air smelled of wet stone and rose soil. Even the walls of the houses seemed to lean closer, listening. When night came, they sat together in the little attic once more. The stove glowed red, and between the windows the old rose boxes waited. Bare twigs now, but alive beneath the surface, Gerda lit a candle and placed it between them. Its flame wavered, steady and golden. Kay looked around the room as though seeing it for the first time. "It's smaller than I remembered," he said with a faint smile. Gerda laughed softly. "Maybe we grew." They opened the window a little. The cool air drifted in, and a single drop of melting snow fell onto the sill. Outside, the stars were pale and peaceful. Somewhere, far to the north, the Snow Queen sat in her silent halls, watching. She felt no anger, no grief, only the faintest curiosity, like a winter morning watching spring arrive. Days passed into weeks, the snow melted, and the first crocuses opened along the fence. The river shone like silver glass in the sunlight. Gerda and Kay spent long afternoons in the garden, replanting their roses. When the buds finally opened, their scent filled the air, soft, sweet, almost forgotten. Sometimes they would sit together by the window, their heads close, speaking quietly. They didn't talk about the palace of ice, or the mirror, or the long nights. Those things had become part of the stillness inside them, memories that no longer hurt. They spoke instead of small things, of bread baking, of clouds drifting, of the way sunlight touched the leaves. Each ordinary moment felt miraculous. On the first true evening of summer, the two of them leaned on the windowsill, watching the last light fade over the river. The sky was a soft gradient of gold and lavender. The water below caught every color like glass. Gerda reached out and touched the rose that climbed toward Kay's window. Its petals brushed his hand. "Do you remember," she said, "when we called this the biggest garden in the world?" Kay smiled. "It still is." They laughed, and the sound mingled with the hum of bees outside, with the slow creak of the clock downstairs, with the world turning gently around them. For a long time they said nothing more. The candle burned lower. The stars came out. At last Gerda whispered, "The snow will come again one day." "Yes," Kay said, "but now we know it melts." Far above the town, a soft wind passed over the river. It carried the faint scent of roses through the open windows, over sleeping rooftops, into the quiet sky. And in that fragrance, for anyone who happened to wake and listen, there was a warmth that did not fade. A reminder that even after the longest winter, hearts can thaw, and love, once found, never truly freezes again.